from South America and have things that are grown here in the US. So that was why it was very interesting to look at that and to look at what's available for the public, basically. And if it was actually becoming a public health issue. So that's why it was something really interesting to look at. Okay, great. No, we were just discussing about my background and what sort of research work I've been doing. We haven't started with the class yet. We were waiting for you. Okay, great. So why don't we get started? Okay. So welcome back, everyone. I'm glad that you guys got a chance to go through the first class and this first session of the review of Rasa. I hope that it has been helpful and that we've been able to get through a bit of the points and different aspects of this topic, and hopefully clarified some of your questions. I did see that some of you had questions regarding um, the effect of rasa on the tissues, the 6 different tastes and its effect on the tissues. So I'll just go over that first before we do anything else in the topic. So one of the questions that one of you had was, why is it that sweet is considered as anabolic and everything else is catabolic? So the reason, when we looked at, we said that the sweet taste actually is the only rasa, or the only taste that helps in nourishing the all 7 of the tissues, whereas the other tastes are they're sort of supplementary, but they don't really help to enhance that nourishment. And if we look back on the elemental composition of that, if we look back on the elemental composition and also the actual qualities of these tastes, we're able to see that sweet has an unctuous and a cold and a heavy quality. So the 6 different tastes, each taste has, again, particular qualities apart from what we've talked about. And this is, these rasa, guna, virya, vipaka, these are not mutually exclusive. They're all sort of intertwined. And the reason we learn about these and we discover different aspects of it is to kind of really understand any substance that's in front of us, how that's going to react with a person. Because remember, everything in the universe, everything that we come in contact with, all has the 5 elements. So at the end of the day, it's all going to break down again to the 5 elements and the different combinations of those 5 elements in a substance, and how that's going to react with the 5 elements in the person's body. So um, the the sweet taste has the gunas, or qualities, of being unctuous, or snigdha, cold, or shita, and guru, or heavy. Those are the particular qualities of sweet, the sweet taste. And sweet taste, because of these gunas, actually help in nourishment. So when we look at digestion and when someone ingests food, that food actually has to first break up, and that breakup happens because of the Jataragni, or the main Agni. And when it breaks up, when we've learned about how the dhatus form, or how the tissues form in a consecutive order, so the food that's broken up then travels out of the stomach, and it starts to go in the different channels. So first it would go to the channel of rasa, or the rasa tissue. In the rasa dhatu, or the rasa tissue, what happens is there are 2 stages of that nourishment that occurs. The first stage is the asthai dhatu, and the second stage is the sthai dhatu. Asthayi means that which is undigested, which is basically what's being nourished from the food that you have just kind of digested. So the food processes first with the Jatragni. It starts to break down. Then it travels to tissues. So it gets to Rasa, that undigested food that is in the stage to nourish the already present rasa dhatu. So the undigested one is the asthayi dhatu, and the digested one, or the already present rasa dhatu, the already nourished rasa dhatu, is the already present rasa dhatu um, is being nourished by that. So in that stage, that's where we know that these qualities of the sweet taste actually help in increasing nourishment, in increasing absorption, and it has everything that each one of these tissues need. Whereas the other tastes, they don't necessarily accomplish that. So in the stage of nourishment of the tissues, Amla Rasa will actually, it helps to stimulate the Agni, it helps to stimulate the digestive fire. However, because of the the fire quality or the fire element present in Amla, it actually helps to reduce the Shukradhatu, or the last reproductive tissue. And because it does that, because of the presence of the fire element in Amla, it's good, but it still, again, does not promote nourishment. So that's why, again, all of the other tastes do not promote nourishment. The only taste that promotes nourishment is the sweet taste. So this is a good question to look at, because we know that amla or sour is a good tonic, because one of the most famous tonics that we know, we come across, is Chyawanprash, which is primarily made up of amla, which is the Indian gooseberry. And amla is, of course, its name is amla, but its rasa, or its taste, is also amla. It's the ultimate manifestation of the taste sour, because that's what it is. But the thing about the amla fruit, or the Indian gooseberry, is it doesn't only have the sour taste. In fact, the Indian gooseberry has all five tastes except for salty. It has sweet, it has sour, it has pungent, bitter, and astringent. But the only one that's missing in that fruit is salty. So there's the subtle combinations of the five elements present in that fruit manifest all five tastes. So that's why that actually it does have a predominant sweet taste. So that's why that actually is considered a rasayana, or a tonic, or something that really helps to nourish the tissues. Another reason why amla is used as a good drug to nourish the tissues, even though it has a lot of that sour taste, it has a lot of that amla rasa, is because whenever we use amla, it's always combined also with other herbs and other substances that also help to nourish the tissues. So things like ghee or purified butter is another substance that helps to nourish the tissues. So whenever you combine different substances that have these similar qualities to produce the effect that you want, it's going to again be absorbed in the body in such a way that it does help to nourish the tissues. I hope that's clear. So in that way, that's why the sweet taste, again, is the only taste out of all of these that helps in nourishing the tissues. Whereas all of the others, because of their combinations, don't really have that nourishing quality. They they can help they can help in other aspects of therapeutics. They can help in taking out or reducing a dosha to help remove blockages. They can help to increase the agni, in that sense. But when it comes to the aspect of nourishment, and the aspect of increasing the doshas or helping the doshas to be nourished in its successive order, the only taste that achieves that is the sweet taste or the madhura rasa. Okay. um, just to go through, because in this question there are many layers for explaining that. So we looked at how sweet helps to nourish the tissues. Amla can also help in a way, but comparatively it still has the end effect of reducing shukra dhatu. That's why it still isn't considered as that it imparts that nourishment. Lavana or salty, because again of the presence of the fire element in that, it causes looseness in the body. The reason it causes looseness is because it tends to draw out the moisture, it tends to draw out the water that's already present in the body. So even if you were to take in, or if you were to consume liquids after having something salty, it still doesn't allow the body to absorb that moisture. Instead, what happens is that moisture stays outside the cells. It doesn't really get to be absorbed inside because of the presence of salt. It's the same thing with nutrition. The liquids that we consume, the nutrition is also part in part with that liquid. It's sort of like a vehicle or an adjuvant to help in proper absorption of that nutrition. So if the fluid or the liquid, the moisture part of it stays outside the cells, or it's being drawn out because of the presence of the salt taste, then again, the body, the tissues, the cells don't get the nourishment that you are consuming because of the predominance or because of the presence of the salty taste. So that's why salt, because it draws out moisture, because it's not allowing the nourishment or the different aspects of digestion, the breakdown that's there in your food. If it's not allowing the tissues to absorb that nourishment, because it's sort of blocking it, what it does is it blocks the absorption, it blocks that taking in, and that again that breakdown for the tissues to be nourished by that. So it's like having water that's, say, water's right here, the water's right here in front of me. However, I can't drink this because I'm not able to get through the glass. So it's kind of like this. I'm not able to get through the glass because this is the barrier that the salt is creating. So that's why salt, again, is another one of the tastes that does not help in nourishment of the different tissues. For pungent, bitter, and astringent, again, it's not the same effect that salty has, but the effect that these have is it's not it's absorbing it's absorbing the nutrients. So what's already present in the body, it actually tends to absorb. Salt helps it, what it does is it hinders absorption. But what the other three tastes do, that's bitter, astringent, and pungent, is that it actually absorbs out the nutrition. That's why these are tastes that actually increase vata. Because it increases vata because it's basically taking away the nutrition that's already present in the body. These are tastes that, for instance, if someone was obese, or if someone had issues with like diabetes, or they had issues with blockages, where they have kapha conditions, where there is already a presence of overnourishment in the body, at that stage these three taste would be very beneficial because it helps to take away or absorb the already present nutrition or the already present nourishment in the body. So because of that, again, since it's absorbing and taking away, it can't ever give the effect of nourishment. It can't ever give the effect or help in nourishing the tissues. So as you can see now, all the other tastes except for sweet, they're all sort of taking away. They're all sort of stopping that process of nutrition. However, sweet is the only one that promotes nourishment. It promotes nutrition. So that's why we say that it has that effect, whereas all the others are anabolic. Okay. So I hope we were able to cover majority of that question that I think a lot of you had, is how we would break down these tastes and how it's going to affect the tissues. Okay, so another aspect that I wanted to discuss for today's class, and again, this is all about the different tastes. I just wanted to go through the different therapeutic activities of each one of the tastes. So again, this is also going to sort of go along with what we just discussed about how these tastes have different effects on the tissues, and also how it presents and reacts when it's in a person's body. So again, sweet taste in general, it's very good for conditions where there's malnourishment or where the body requires a certain amount of nutrients. So for instance, if the tissues were in a kshaya avastha, or if they were malnourished, if they were depleted, in that case, sweet taste would be very beneficial. And that again goes along with what we just said. Sweet taste is also good and used for conditions where there is a predominance of vata and for pitta. The only condition or a situation where you would not want to use the sweet taste is where there are conditions of kapha, because sweet actually increases kapha. So that's the only conditions where we would not want to use the sweet taste or sweet taste predominant substances. Um, it also is useful for helping in production of breast milk, because again, these are nourishing. These are the sweet taste predominant foods are very nourishing. It helps for again nourishment to the new mother, and it also helps for that production of breast milk. Breast milk again is a upadhatu, or a subsequent production of the transformation of rasa to rakta dhatu, or from the rasa tissue element to the rakta tissue. So when that transformation occurs, the byproduct of that is actually breast milk. So in that way, we would need more more consumption of sweet taste. So this would seem kind of contradictory to what you would know in postpartum care, is that you would think after delivery you would want to stay away from sweet things and you would want to stay away from nourishment. However, in Ayurveda, what's considered is after a woman gives birth, there is so much a drain of energy. There is so much that has been taken out and taken away from her physically, that actually her body requires that nourishment, not only to help in producing milk and into to feeding her child, but also in helping to rebuild and to re-energize herself. So that's why the sweet taste or sweet taste predominant substances, foods, or herbs are very helpful for her, because it really helps to again to build back the tissues, to sort of build back her strength and her immunity, as well as help in production of breast milk, so that she can also provide nourishment and the nutrients and the immunoglobulins and all of the natural nutrition that is passed along from a mother to her child. Okay, the next taste is sour taste, and the therapeutic indication for that is you would actually want to use it for conditions of vata, because again that helps to it it helps to pacify vata. It pacifies vata because of the presence of the fire element. So the heat that's produced from the sour taste actually really help to again pacify vata. In the case of a person who has a reduced appetite or a low agni, sour also helps in that sense, because again, because of the presence of the um, the fire element, it increases Agni. So when it increases Agni, it also increases a person's appetite. It will help to digest. It will help to digest any presence of ama or any blockage in the channels that may be occurring. For the salty taste would be indicated and be useful again in conditions of vata because it helps to pacify vata. In cases of those which have a lot of kapha as well, um, because it's what it does again is it absorbs moisture. So, for instance, if someone has congestion in their chest, something that's salty is really good. A practice that we use in Ayurveda is in children who have, you can hear the congestion if they have a cold. What we do is we can even take a bit of salt. We use rock salt and mix it in sesame oil, and that's applied on the chest. And just the application of oil and salt, the salt is so absorbent that it actually helps to break up the congestion. So that's applied, and then a little bit of moist heat, like steam. So you can either ask the child would sit next to a humidifier, or you can apply a bit of moist heat on their chest. And what that, just the presence of the salt alone, because it's so absorbing and it really helps to break up that kapha, it takes away the moisture from it. That that is sufficient enough to really help to clarify and sort of open up their channels and allow them to have to breathe easy. So it salt, it on its own, it has that much of quality. It has that much of potency to produce that absorbing effect. So very good in high kapha conditions, or in cough as an expectorant. Yes, rock salt. Rock salt is typically what's used in those conditions. Katu, or pungent taste, is used again. It's a very good uh, taste for increasing Agni. So it helps in the case of indigestion, so chronic indigestion, things like irritable bowel syndrome. These are all issues where the Agni has become very low. It's become very weak, and you would need to consume foods that really always help to increase that Agni. That even you can have something that is sweet in taste, but it has to be combined with something that has that fire element in it. Because if it's not, if you're only going to consume something that's sweet, or only going to consume things that are heavy, um, rock salt and sesame oil, tila tela, sesame oil. So that's kind of heated a little bit and applied on the chest, and then you would either use a humidifier or a hot compress with just a cloth dipped in really hot water and sort of patted on the chest. It's really good to break up, to sort of break up the kapha, to loosen it up, and also to absorb the moisture from it. So it really helps to clear up that congestion that someone would feel. So again, the pungent taste really helps to increase the Agni. It really helps to digest again any form of ama or undigested material in the body, in not only in the abdomen, but if it's present anywhere else in the body also. The longer or the more you consume the katu, or that pungent taste, it really travels through and is able to reach the other parts of the body also that may have blockages or may have presence of ama. So in saying that, you could also use pungent for in case of obesity, in cases of diabetes, in cases of psoriasis that is similar to that the person has similar presentations of that with diabetes. Again, these are examples of how we use this in a therapeutic aspect. You may not necessarily need that, but just so that you know how the concept of using these different tastes and how we work that into understanding the actual makeup of a drug, the makeup of our food, the makeup of any substance that we're using. Okay? The next is tikta or bitter. And in that, the therapeutic use for bitter would be cases like jaundice or again loss of appetite if the agni is really low, in skin conditions. The difference between the pungent and the bitter is that the bitter again is one of the other tastes that actually help to pacify pitta. So it's dry, it's cold, and it's light. So in that sense, for instance, if because of the cold factor, it actually helps to increase vata, because of the dry factor also it increases vata, but because of the fact that it is cold, it's dry, it's light, it actually really helps to pacify pitta. So it's if you see, it's the opposite of the pitta qualities. So tikta is really good for pitta sort of conditions. Excessive heat in the body, it is again, tikta helps to increase the appetite, so it increases the appetite, but it does not increase pitta. So that's really important to understand here. It has both the qualities. It will increase appetite, it will increase agni, but it will not increase pitta. It will not cause that transformation of pitta. That is the unique quality of tikta or bitter taste. So this is good to know because for instance, if you have someone who has, or you know someone who is a pitta person, or a pitta constitution, but they still have this issue where they don't have an appetite or they don't have good digestion, then something that is bitter, bitter foods, bitter things actually would really be helpful for them because it does both. It will pacify their pitta as well as increase their digestion. So that's a really good subtle way for us to understand how, apart from the other tastes that are good for pitta, this bitter taste would actually be even more beneficial in the case of pitta. Okay. Or for instance, if have you ever seen in the summer sometimes you break out with these hives that they they have sort of a pitta presentation. They're very red and they're burning, but they're also dry, and internally it seems almost like the person has a fever. They have no appetite at all, but if you look at the rashes, there's a lot of heat, there's a lot of burning. So in those cases, things that are bitter in taste, so a good example of that is something like bitter gourd. It's a type of vegetable that grows in Southeast Asia. You get it in most health food stores. It's very, very bitter. But something like that, just the juice of that is very useful because it really helps to reduce that pitta, that burning sensation in the skin, but also increase their appetite. So you're looking at all aspects of what's contributing to their symptoms and their condition, but also helping to pacify, helping to negate the root cause as well as pacify the symptoms that they're having. So that's where bitter taste would be useful. Kashaya is the astringent. And the thing about kashaya is that it actually, in one way, is a combination. Some classical texts mention that kashaya or astringent taste is actually a combination of almost all the all the tastes, because it has a little bit of all of them. So it does have a unique quality in that sense. Um, in certain foods, sometimes when you combine all the tastes together, you will also end up with a little bit of astringent as well because of the way it's combined. So the astringent taste has some particular qualities as well. It tends to be very dry, cold, but also heavy. And that's why it has this particular action that it increases vata, but it also it doesn't really help in pacifying pitta as well. It actually it aggravates pitta. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. I got that wrong. It pacifies pitta. So in the kashaya rasa actually has the effect because of the cold. It helps to pacify pitta. I'm sorry. That was my mistake. So we've gone through sort of the therapeutic actions and the indications of these different tastes. In general, if you were to try and make out a diet, and you have a chart um, in your textbook or in your pamphlet. So in that, for instance, if you were to look at foods that are beneficial for vata, again, you would look for things that are sweet, salty, and sour because that helps to, again, pacify vata. So in that, we would say there are classical texts that actually have described the potency and the tastes of each food. So some foods don't necessarily have to taste sweet to actually have that sweet, the madhura rasa in it. Um, in that, it goes a little bit more technical in the aspects of how we break it down. They were able to find this out through a lot of research and a lot of experimenting to find out what the elemental composition of these foods are. But in classical texts, for instance, coconut is something that is sweet. It may not necessarily taste very sweet, ever so slightly, but it is sweet in taste. It's cold in potency, and we'll be talking about potency or virya in a little bit. Um, but it has these particular qualities and effects, and that's something that would be, again, because of its cold potency, can it can increase vata ever so slightly, but because of its sweet taste, it also helps to pacify. So for instance, if you were to take a little bit of oil, coconut oil, because of the snigdhata or the unctuousness of it would help to pacify vata ever so slightly. It's oil and it's sweetened taste. But again, if it's taken too much or frequently, it will eventually increase vata because of the fact that it's also very cooling. It's very cold. So if coconut water was consumed, that actually would help. Again, that would eventually increase vata as well because that is even more cooling than the coconut oil. So we'll be talking next about the viryas and the different stages or aspects of things that are cold or things that are hot. Okay. So do we have any questions for Rasa, or can we wrap up for Rasa? Okay. So I think we've covered most of what's there for rasa. Next, we'll talk about vipaka, and vipaka is sort of the transition. First, we look at rasa as how it's present in a food before it's consumed. What are the inherent qualities in a food and the inherent taste in that? Vipaka is the taste that is predominant after digestion. So what I was describing to you at the beginning, and I know you're going to get to that in one of your later sessions as well, where you're looking at the transformation of the tissues. So vipaka is important in that transformation. What occurs is that when we consume a food, when we consume say a sweet food or a sour food, things that have these tastes in them, you get the inherent quality of that. But that once that is digested and it gets to the stage of actually nourishing the tissues, each one of these tastes then have again a second post-digestive effect, and that is what is known as the vipaka. This is very unique to the Ayurvedic pharmacology and unique to the concepts in Ayurveda, because we really look at the whole aspect of what we're consuming, how it's processed and how it's digested and contributing to a person's body, how it's contributing to a person's health. And what our ancient acharyas have figured out is that when these tastes are consumed, so for instance, sweet taste transforms again to the sweet taste. Sweet and salty transforms to sweet as a post-digestive effect. Sour always transforms to sour, and bitter and pungent transforms to pungent. Okay, so these are the breakup of how these post-digestive effects are. The effect of the sweet or the madhura vipaka, the sweet vipaka, is it also brings out nourishment. So for instance, there are drugs that, or there are herbs, or there are foods that have a sweet taste or a salty taste. So salty, we would say, oh, well, it's salty, so that's not very nourishing. But for instance, if a salty substance still has a vipaka that is sweet, then it can be that exception. Remember, I was telling you there are certain exceptions to these rules. It can still impart a certain amount of nourishment. It can still impart a certain amount of transfer of nutrients to these tissues. So vipaka, again, really occurs at the time when these tissues are forming. So pungent, bitter, and astringent has a post-digestive effect of pungent. So it in that case, a pungent post-digestive effect would be something that does not contribute to nourishment of the tissues. So instead of nourishment of the tissues, it would actually help to take away nourishment. So for instance, in the case, if there was a blockage in the channels of these tissues, and you'll be learning about the different channels of these tissues. If there was a blockage in the channel, you would want to you would want to consume foods that are either bitter, pungent, or astringent, because when you consume that, it helps to take away the amount of nutrition. It helps to take away things that are excessive, things that are already present. So in that taking away action, it helps to actually remove the blockage. It helps to take away that excessive nourishment, and it would actually help to negate that condition. So in that sense, these pungent, bitter, and astringent would be useful and beneficial. And in the opposite of that, sweet and salty substances that are sweet and salty that have a sweet vipaka, or a post-digestive effect that is sweet, would also impart sort of the general indications and the effects of the sweet rasa, or the sweet taste. So we've already looked at what is the effect of the sweet taste on the body. A sweet vipaka would have a similar effect on the tissues. Okay? So again, we may need to go over vipaka once you get to the point of looking at digestion and looking at the transformation of dhatus a little bit more closely, because that's really where, and that's actually the stage of digestion where this occurs. Okay, so that's the post-digestive effect. Would sweet and salty then be anabolic? Yes. If it is a sweet vipaka, yes. Sweet and salty, which have a sweet vipaka, will be anabolic. So that's the only exception where salty can also still be anabolic, can still cause nourishment. That, again, the only exception. There are certain cases where you have salty things that don't have a sweet vipaka, and instead it has a pungent vipaka. And in that case, that, again, the reason why these exceptions and these things occurs is because most substances, or most foods, drugs, herbs that we use are not they don't necessarily have only one taste. They may have multiple tastes. And the presence of the multiple tastes really give us an idea as to what is the elemental composition of that substance. If the elemental composition of that substance is stronger to produce that particular vipaka, then that is really overpowering just the presence of that one taste. So for instance, there are substances, there are herbs that have a sweet taste in it, but it does not necessarily always have a sweet vipaka. And again, this is a little bit, it's a little bit detailed and a little complicated, but it's just kind of to give you an idea as to how we understand these herbs that we have and how those are utilized for therapeutic effects. When we're looking at vipaka, that's really important, again, in the therapeutic effect it's going to have on the body. Even with foods, it's the therapeutic effect that it's going to have on the body. That's why we look at vipaka so carefully. And that's why there are some intricate details in that. Again, because we're really trying to decipher and really trying to understand what is the elemental composition of that substance. Then it would give us a very clear idea as to how that, again, that translates into either nourishing the tissues or taking out blockages, increasing the agni, all the different aspects that we look at in therapeutics and in Ayurveda. Okay. So again, I've just gone through that very quickly, very briefly. There isn't too much more that you need to know as such. For vipakas, just a quick review. The sweet vipaka tends to help in increasing kapha. The sour vipaka actually causes an increase of pitta, and the pungent vipaka causes an increase in vata. And that again goes along with what we have already looked at in the rasas. Once we get back to the transformation of tissues, maybe we can revisit this topic, because this is going to make a lot more sense when you have that information as to how the tissues are forming. This process actually occurs at that time, so it'll make a whole lot more sense once you get that introduction and that information. Okay, so let me go through Virya. So Virya is actually the potency of different substances. Everything that we consume or that we are exposed to in general can be either attributed to either hot or cold. And again, that's how we react to it. They say that these substances are labeled as either hot and cold because it's in a representation of the soma, or the cold aspects of the body. You can say the moon, and the ushna, or the hot potency, is sort of a representation of the things from the sun, or that's predominant with the sun sort of element, or the fire element, or those things in the universe. So it's broadly broken up into these two, either hot or cold. These, again, for cold potency things, they tend to be more of that, again, which increase kapha. For hot potency, it tends to be things that increase pitta. Vata doesn't actually have too much to do with the attribution of the Shita Virya or Ushna Virya. Vata tends to be more attributed as the catalyst, or the Yogavahi, that which helps in transforming or transitioning or in delivery. But the hot potency and the cold potency tends to always be attributed either to an effect of kapha or to pitta. Okay? And that, again, we've looked at in your textbook. You have a breakdown of the different tastes and what the effects are. So the sweet taste tends to be shita, or cooling. The sour is heating. Salty is also heating. Pungent is also heating. Bitter is cooling, and astringent is cooling. And again, that goes along with what we see as how its effect on pitta. If it's increasing pitta, then it is a hot potency. If it's decreasing pitta, then it is a cold potency. So that it's that in general, we look at the different aspects of that, of different herbs, of our foods, of even activities that we do, the sort of potency that it enhances in our body. So there are certain activities that you may do that actually can enhance the cold virya in your body, or certain activities that we do that can enhance the Ushna Virya in your body. So, for instance, exercising actually helps to enhance the Ushna Virya, or the hot potency in your body, because it not only does it increase Vata, but it also increases friction, it increases movement, it sort of enhances your fire. So that's an activity that would help the hot potency in your body. It would activate the hot potency in your body. Whereas, for instance, sleeping during the day, um, sort of excessive sleeping, um, lounging around, a sort of a stagnant lifestyle, that would increase the cold potency in your body. It actually activates more of the cold elements in your body. Okay, so these are just an aspect, again, a very general review of what virya or potency is. Um, Cold potencies tend to be things or substances which are cold potency tend to be snigdha or unctuous. It tends to be very nourishing, very rasayana. Um, and they also tend to help prolong longevity, whereas hot potency tends to be things that increase digestion, it causes emesis or purgation, it increases thirst, can be responsible for vertigo, and also helps in reducing nourishment in the body. Okay, so again, we've just gone through quickly just a very brief review of these different topics. Again, I hope that it has been helpful, and we've added a little bit more, another layer to your understanding of Ayurveda and Rasa Guna Virya Vipaka. Um, Hopefully, we'll get a chance to discuss some more about it. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to send it over to Hillary or to me, and I'd be more than happy to clarify your doubts. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you all have a wonderful night.